These days of lockdown from COVID-19 have been strange and difficult for many of us. With our physical world having been constrained, we all, however, have had more time to notice and appreciate the natural world and all that it holds around us. What is outside your window or in your locality growing right now? What is your part in that growth? What is your spiritual response to that? Is it to give thanks? Is it to act responsibly? Is it to be creative? Having not long moved into a house in Edinburgh, we have had the joy of seeing flowers emerge in our garden that we didn't plant and to whom we hadn't properly been introduced. We think these in the picture are primula, you might know better than we do, but they were magnificent, with their purpley mauve heads boldly standing tall. And they're on show there in centre stage for weeks, but eventually they began to fade, and their heads began to lose their colour and to wither. I longed for them to remain, but even in their demise there was something beautiful. And by this time their place had been taken by our red flowering azalea. Beginnings and endings. At the very start of the Bible, before the arrival of humankind, we read in Genesis of God delighting in his creation. God looked and saw that it was good, very good. Maybe delighting in the same way that a gardener does. In the Christian year, we have celebrated the end of Jesus' earthly ministry, his life, death, resurrection and ascension. And last week we celebrated the coming at Pentecost of the Holy Spirit, coming to renew the whole earth. Creation reminds us that life has seasons, some of them more welcome than others, perhaps, but that each will pass and life will be renewed. Last week I was speaking to somebody and saying to them, look, when you see all this beauty that's around you, is it still possible to say that life is meaningless? Or does that thought only come, that realization only come with the eyes of faith? Is that something that comes first through an encounter of Jesus Christ? What do you think? Well, let's listen now to Margaret as she tells us something of her walks during this period of lockdown and what it says to her spiritually.
I have never been what people would call a real walker, most of my walking taking place on Princes Street. It was only after I joined the Aging Well walking group that I came to appreciate the real sense of well-being you get from walking in the countryside. During lockdown, walking has been a real source of joy. We are blessed with some lovely walks around Penicuik, from local woodlands, hills and the open spaces of John Clark's estate. Since lockdown, the trees have flourished through spring and now into summer. The weather in the main has been wonderful, and this has enhanced the walking experience. Although not strictly allowed, I walked with Christine, who turned out to be a great walk leader. We explored our local area, finding new delights every day, and walking enabled us to go on paths we would perhaps not have walked alone. We were sometimes in very low spirits, missing family, friends, and our real lives. We talked lots, sometimes walked silently, lost in our own thoughts, sang occasionally, and very often cried. But sitting at each end of a wooden bench, surrounded by trees, lush green grass, wildflowers, vibrant yellow gorse and distant hills, with birds singing under a bright blue sky, spirits lifted, and we were reminded that God, who created all this beauty, was always with us even when things seemed bleak and hopeless. He would calm all the panic and lift the sadness. We always walked home with lighter hearts.
With creation, there's always more for us to see. Something that will surprise us or take our breath away. The closer we look, the more that we realize the connectedness and interconnectedness across all that God has made. Listen now to Doug as he describes something of that and the way that he was involved in a project a few years ago.
Hi, most folk I'm sure will recognise the sheep in the picture as Dolly, which was born at the Roslin Institute in 1996. Dolly was the first mammal cloned from an adult cell. I suppose the main legacy of Dolly is not the cloning of animals, but it has given researchers the potential to reprogram cells in order to produce stem cells which can be used in the repair of organs in the future and tissues. Being a Christian and being involved in the program that produced Dolly, it never ceased to amaze me just how creative our God is. I used to get amazed when I looked down a microscope at a sheep embryo, and it truly amazes me when I see pictures of Dolly today. It just reminds me that God is such a creator, and that in our DNA he has placed all our characteristics which are in every single cell of our body. And we should give thanks to such an amazing creator, and it really behoves us to look after his creation and to use his creation wisely.
Psalm 104 reminds us that the glory of the Lord is visible in the created order around us. The psalm is not of a passive landscape, but of a dynamic, living, breathing, singing universe in which all things hold together. It was the Russian writer Dostoevsky who said this: "Love all God's creation, the whole and every grain of sand of it. Love every leaf, every ray of God's light. Love the animals, love the plants, love everything. For if you love everything, you will perceive the divine mystery in things. Once you perceive it, you will begin to comprehend it better every day, and you will come at last to love the whole world with an all-embracing love." And so let's listen finally to Alice from the PNK Walking Group as she expresses herself this sense of awe and wonder, this joy of being part of God's amazing creation.
It's often when we're walking in the countryside, in the hills and the woods, and look around us, that we're hit by the magnitude and beauty of God's creation. One time when I remember this happening to me was about 4 years ago, when my husband and I were walking the Borders Abbey's Way. It was our 4th day of walking. We had had a week of great weather and walking through beautiful countryside. I just found myself singing, "O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the works thy hand has made, then sings my soul." At first this was silent, but then, unfortunately for my husband, it was not. I was just filled with a sense of God's greatness and of his love for all creation.